good point. You can be physically present around people, but emotionally and mentally absent.
I made art of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of us do, right?
Yeah. But I would say now you're very present.
Yeah, but to be real,
Yeah.
I still struggle with this, right? We had a hard week this week.
Yeah, we did.
There's a first responder that took his life, and we went over to help the agencies that were impacted.
Yeah.
And I still struggle with it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the default is to go back into isolation.
Hey everyone, this is Christina and Daniel Deffenbaugh with 1042 Project, and welcome to episode 7 of the Shared Voices podcast. We're so excited to have you here with us today, and we finally get to talk about happy stuff.
Yes.
All the happy things now.
Yeah, I got my story out of the way, so that feels good.
Yeah, the hard stuff anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of other stuff, but yeah, we got through it, and now we're going to talk about some of the happy stuff.
Yeah.
And then shortly we'll be bringing on some exciting guests that I'm excited for everybody to hear from. I think it's going to bring in a lot of healing and understanding, and I'm excited for the guests that we got coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be really good.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump in. So we decided that we wanted to share what it's like to, I guess, what life has been like for Daniel since he's experienced healing and growth, because we really shared a lot of details about what life was like for him when he was struggling, not reaching out, didn't have the coping skills, really didn't have any tools in his tool belt. So now that he's, made some progress and is down the road on his healing journey, we wanted to share what life is like now, just to offer some hope for those of you that aren't quite there yet, so we can just give you something to look forward to. This is what it's been like for Daniel.
Yeah, because that's what it's about. It's about getting your life back, right? And your purpose back.
Yeah, and it is possible. There is hope.
It is, and it doesn't matter how far down you are. If you were like me and you're addicted to pain pills and alcohol and dealing with all this PTSD and depression, and no matter how far down you are, no matter how many times you tried to get help, there's still hope out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to talk about the good stuff and how my life's changed from then to now, because it's dark to light. It's
different. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did give him a warning this time. Usually he doesn't get to know the questions ahead of time. I gave him a warning this time, so he had a little time to gather his thoughts, because I like questions, and sometimes my questions are kind of loaded. So
yeah. So I looked at the sheet for 30 seconds, so here we are.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All that prepping you did. Holy cow. Okay.
Well, it's all right here. So
yeah, no, that's true. So the first thing I wanted to ask is, like, in a nutshell, right? What is your life like now versus how it was back then?
Well, I think they kind of heard about how my life was back then.
Yeah.
It was full of destruction.
Yep.
Full of loss and trauma and
isolation.
Feeling of never being able to get my life back.
Yeah.
Come to find out, not only can you get your life back, you can get more of a life back.
Yeah.
So with me, probably one of the biggest things is I'm no longer in isolation. Isolation is the devil's tool.
Playground.
Oh my goodness. He loves when you're isolated, and he will do whatever he can to get you isolated.
Yeah. And when you're already struggling and you're in isolation, that's hard, because then you're just left by yourself with everything.
Yeah. So getting out of isolation, and what I mean by that is some people can not be in isolation, they think, because they're still going through the motions of their day, but there's also another level of isolation, which is where you're not there. You may be going through the motions, but you're really not there.
That's a good point. You can be physically present around people, but emotionally and mentally absent.
I made art of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of us do, right?
Yeah. But I would say now you're very present.
Yeah, but to be real, I still struggle with this, right? We had a hard week this week.
Yeah, we did.
There's a first responder that took his life, and we went over to help the agencies that were impacted.
Yeah.
And I still struggle with it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the default is to go back into isolation. Not because it's easier, maybe because it's just familiar. Right?
That's what you know.
If you're if there's a dog running through the house and a loud bang goes off, he runs to the corner and sits in isolation. Like, I feel like that's a safe place to be.
Yeah.
But I know it's not.
Right.
So like this week, after we got back from the meetings we have, helping the first responders that I've lost a brother.
Yep.
That weighs heavy on you, right?
Oh yeah.
So sometimes after we go to things like that, it's almost like I feel like I ran a marathon. I feel exhausted. So then my brain's like, well, I'm exhausted. Time to go back to the bedroom, go in isolation. And sometimes it's good to go back there and get some quiet time, but there's a difference between quiet time and isolation.
Yep.
And honestly, this week I've probably been a little isolated from time to time because I'm still coping, right?
Yeah.
What we do is hard.
Yeah.
I love what we do. I love the purpose what we have, but that it has, but it's tough.
Like in everything, especially with first responders, you have to have that balance,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So yeah, I think that, and like you said, there's kind of a line there.
Yeah. But that's why it takes a community, that's why it's, I have you who understands me, and you help bring me out of those times or prevent me from going
That far.
back into isolation.
Yeah.
Because isolation, it can be for weeks at a time, but it can also just be, 3 hours at a time or an hour at a time to where you're escaping for the wrong reasons. I know it's kind of hard. There's like a fine line between what's okay with some quiet time, and then when is quiet time become too much,
Right.
to where you're now not living your life out, right?
Yeah.
You're excluding yourself from stuff. So one of the biggest things for me was to get community back.
Yeah.
And to get out of isolation and to get out and to feel safe when going out.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
to just
been a
say
big thing
somebody,
for you.
if to just tell somebody to get up and get out of isolation and go, like, it's not that easy, right?
Yeah.
There's tools to this and there's levels to this. A lot of people just don't understand it. Why can't you just get out of isolation? It's not that easy for a lot of us.
Yeah.
We need help. And it's an ongoing fight. I mean, halfway through our day, there's sometimes I'm looking to just escape sometimes. And it's an ongoing thing. So when I first came out of isolation, it was slowly. It wasn't like, I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
Hello. No, it wasn't like that. It was very slow and
I would say intentional steps too.
yeah. Yep. Yeah, I was trying to be careful, but not be too careful to not get out of my comfort zone, because the comfort zone is where we have trouble getting out of.
Yeah.
And there's no growth inside
The comfort zone.
this comfort zone. You got to get outside your comfort zone. And that's how growth starts.
Yeah.
So that's how it worked with me, is I'd get out a little bit and come back, and then I did good. I went out and I did that, and it was great. And then just constantly working on it.
Yeah.
And really, for me, right, how do you get out of isolation? What you have to have a reason to come out of isolation. So for me, is I wanted community again.
Yeah.
Just even a couple years ago, I had nobody in my life. I had
You had no friends.
no friends, no positive,
influences.
people in my life. I had nobody to turn to. When I picked up my phone, if I wanted to call help, there wasn't help there. I isolated everybody.
Yeah.
But now that I've got out, and one of the first things I started to do was I got saved, obviously, and I started to go to church. And then in the church community, I started to find like-minded people who loved me for who I am and not who I was. And starting to talk to them and opening up and just having friends again.
Yeah.
People to text throughout the week. How you doing, brother? How's your week going?
And have coffee with them.
Yeah.
You're engaged with them.
Yeah. We have coffee throughout the week. I meet with different people for coffee and fellowship, and it's for me, but it's also for them too, because a lot of people I have coffee with struggle with stuff as well, and it just gives us a time to voice what's going through. And then from outside of that, it's just been me more involved with the family.
I can see that even just over the span of our relationship, which hasn't been like super long, but from how things were when we first started our relationship to now, your involvement with the family has increased exponentially. And I can see you enjoying our time together, enjoying engaging with, me, the kids, and
right. And
family.
it wasn't before. It wasn't that the family wasn't engaging or wasn't loving.
Yeah.
It was just isolation again.
Which I could feel that then too. I knew it wasn't ever about us. It was never about your family. It was where you were at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. But just getting out and starting to build connections with like-minded people, whether it's, reach out to us, contact us, go to our page and hit the Get Connected button. And just finding a community of people that understand you.
Yeah.
One of the real cool things I did, and we talked about this before, was I was invited by a friend to go to our first conference. It's the first time I had ever been to a conference, and I was very scared.
Yeah.
And I wasn't scared because I don't know how to be around people. I was scared because this was the first time I was introduced back into the law enforcement / first responder community.
Yeah.
And I walked in there with my head held down. I didn't feel like I belonged there. This is before I walked in. So as I walk in, this is how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And it's taken all the courage I have in me to get one foot in front of the other. To do this whole trip. It was out of state. There's a lot of planning that had to go into this. And so I didn't know how I was going to be accepted from law enforcement because I've always felt like an outcast since I went out on medical disability. I feel like I just feel like an outcast. I'm dealing with that now, and I don't feel like that as much. But when I walked in there, everybody was so loving and kind, and literally the love just overflowed. And it was like, wow. This not being accepted stuff was in my head, or it was from my local agency,
or how you interpreted.
Yes,
Yeah.
A lot of times I interpret stuff for the worst.
Well, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about too was, and again, this is something even I've been able to see, because we talked a lot about shame and guilt and how this shame and guilt is very heavy. It weighed heavy on you. And it also kind of tints the lens that you see life through, So when you're harboring all this shame and guilt, you're kind of primed, right, to receive messages with judgment and negativity, even if it wasn't sent that way, or, you know what I mean? It was just how you were interpreting things. But as you heal and as you grow and you're not holding on to that shame and guilt, you're not so primed to receive things in a judgmental or negative light. And I feel like I've seen that change in you. Would you agree with that? Do you feel that there's been a difference there?
For sure. I was, and probably sometimes still is, a very sensitive person. I never take what anybody says as positive, even if they say, I mean, you see me, you'll make a compliment or something and I'll like downplay it and like squash it down. And then
you have gotten a lot better though. I'll give you
that.
Yeah, you're getting there.
Oh yeah. So I used to always think, number one, everybody hated me. Nobody liked me. I was an outcast. I didn't make it. People look down on me. But really a lot of that was just in my head.
Yeah. Because that's how you felt about you.
Right.
So you're
I didn't even tell you this yesterday.
projecting that.
Yeah, yesterday when I was at the grocery store, I ran into somebody. No, it wasn't a first responder, but he played on our softball team.
Oh, okay.
For our first responders. And honestly, when I first saw him, I kind of had my head down at first.
Really?
Out of habit.
Yeah.
I didn't say hi to him the first time we walked by.
Really?
I just felt ashamed. And then we walked back by again and he said hi. And I stopped and I said hi. And we started talking. And even at the beginning of the conversation, I was nervous.
Oh.
And I was it felt like I was even talking soft because he's like, what? He was asking about what we're doing these days and stuff like that. And I wasn't sure if he knew I was even out of law enforcement. So I just said, yeah, I'm out of law enforcement. And he's just like, no big deal, man. How are you? I don't care about that. It was just really cool.
That's great.
Because sometimes as first responders, we think everything is our identity and our job. And man, I had those two entangled. And sometimes I still do.
Right, yeah.
But I've come a long way to not just thinking that everybody, when somebody says something or somebody looks at me or somebody comments on something where I take it personally, I've come a long way with that. I let that stuff roll off. But that's taken a lot of time as well.
Because it's a process, like everything. It's a process. It's not black and white. You spend a lot of time in the gray, working your way there,
That's for sure. And that's why healing, and recovering from PTSD, PTSI, whatever you want to call it, takes time.
Yeah.
It's not just a one thing and you're done. It's multiple different habits and different things that you have to change to become change.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that and I'm still working on it, working on holy habits like Pastor talks about at church and trying to make the right habits. And those habits aren't just things that we do outwardly. It's habits that we do inwardly. When I first start to think a bad thought, I've learned to put the truth there instead of the lie.
Absolutely.
So to me, that's growth.
Yeah.
And I've continued to do that. And a lot of this is, like I said, is inward. It's inward. you have to do inside.
Because that's where it all starts too.
Yeah. But one thing is a lot of my bad habits I don't need anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's also a huge difference.
Yeah.
The habits that you had previously and the habits that you had now. Like before, you would drink every night before bed to get to sleep.
Yeah. Or
And
when I was on my, back in my days on the pills,
yeah.
it was pills and alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's literally not in your life anywhere. But here's the other thing, though. You replace those habits with good habits. Like
Yes.
the space just didn't become void. You know,
No.
you had to pick something healthy to put in there instead.
Yeah. You have to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to magically show up.
Yeah. It doesn't happen by accident.
Right. You have to do it.
Yeah. But that's the other nice part is it can be one step at a time, because also all of the changes that you've experienced and the progress that you've made, again, it wasn't overnight. It was piece by piece, thing by thing, habit by habit, change by change. So you don't, what's the saying? Like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Yeah. It's like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But don't be eating elephants. That's weird.
That is weird.
And they're protected. So
we don't recommend that.
Every time I hear that saying, I always picture a big fat elephant with a fork in the side of him. I don't know why.
Brutal.
I know.
Are you ready for my next question?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So, and I let Daniel know too, some of these questions are just out of my curiosity. So play along with me here.
I'm her pet. I'm her test pet.
I would say mildly for my entertainment with love.
I know.
Okay. So I wanted to know, do you experience or struggle with triggers like you used to? Because like back in the day, right, a trigger could derail your week, your month.
Yeah. So triggers, yeah. Things that make me think backwards to what I went through. Yes. So I've always struggled with triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times those triggers are locations that I might be in, sounds, a lot of different things. Triggers before would send me into isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Something would trigger me, boom, to my dungeon I go.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. The triggers with learning how to cope and to grow, mentally, it's again like one bite at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, when you get that, you have to learn the tools that when you have that trigger to immediately replace it with, again, the truth.
Yeah.
Because usually a trigger is full of lies.
Yeah.
Once you're triggered, your brain and the enemy will start attacking you and beating you down. And you have to immediately attack that trigger with the truth. Otherwise, your brain will go off on the races and send you in a dark hole.
So it sounds like, first of all, you identify it for what it is now.
Yes, and that's the key. You got to sometimes, before I didn't know when I was triggered.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know why all of a sudden I switched or changed or what.
Oh.
When I started to get help and in counseling and stuff, I started to learn about triggers and what they are, and that they don't have to control you.
Yeah.
You can control them.
Mm-hmm.
And learning how to use those tools.
Yeah.
To deal with a trigger, because triggers are going to come and going to go.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things you can do to reduce the amount of triggers or the intensity of them, through like EMDR and some of the other stuff that's out there. A lot of different ways. But again, that's something I still work on. So I still get triggered. Obviously, you know that.
Right. But it does not look like what it used to at all.
No, like I said, it's no longer devastating. It's no longer destroys me because I have the tools to get out of it.
Yeah. And now I feel like I hear about it a lot more often. I feel like I get a lot of communication from you.
That's part of the process, right? Is you have to voice your thoughts and your opinions and your emotions. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Your emotions, you have to voice those.
And your opinions too, you know?
So you're hearing it more because that's a tool, is to process it and share it with somebody. Just getting it out of your mouth, just your lips saying it.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that helps me be more supportive to you, because then I have a much better understanding of what you're thinking and feeling and going through. Like I can't read your mind, so I only know what you tell me, and that helps me a lot, honestly.
But for instance, this week I was we were dealing with hard stuff, and it
Yeah.
had to do with the suicide of a first responder. So that brings me back to what makes me think about what I was going to do all
Yeah.
those times, and what my family would have went through, and
And you did make a comment, just to be raw, like we are. He had shared at one point, it was just between him and I, that like he heard what people were saying and thought that would have been my friends going through that.
yeah,
That would have been my loved ones feeling hurt and upset. And so you, I guess, drew on that experience and, you know what I mean? Like played it out in your head what that would have been.
yeah, and it would have sent me back to my unhealthy habits.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what's cool is now that I've started to deal with my mental health. Just to go back a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the urge to drink
Yeah.
as much.
Right.
To be open, honest, and transparent this week, during through that,
Mm-hmm.
not because I was going to act on it, but because it popped in my head, I wanted to voice it to you.
Yes. And you did.
And what did I say?
You said normally I would have, or like back then, I can't remember how you started it, but like I would have really wanted a drink right now, or I could really use
Yeah,
a drink right now. Yeah, no,
to
that's
remind
right.
you, I was
it was
telling
in the
you,
moment. Yes, yeah, that you would have really wanted a drink. Like
not wanted. I was
did.
telling you, I want a drink. I want to
Yes.
drink right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was in the moment. It
Right.
wasn't.
I meant past tenses and now. Like it wasn't right now. You said it. It was
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
then. But you're right. Like when you were saying it, you said that you want to drink in that moment. But I loved that you said that to me. I loved that you voiced that to me because then, number one, it built trust because then I was hearing that you will share with me when you're struggling and when you're, I don't want to use the word tempted, but you know what I mean? Like what you're feeling. It showed me that you'll share that with me and you're not going to choose to struggle with it on your own and that I'm not going to be left to wonder, that it will be communicated and then we can work on it together and that I get to be your partner in this.
Yeah,
And that you'll let me be your
it just
partner.
it just felt good to say it at the time.
Yeah.
It was in my head, and I just said, man, my default is I want to drink right now.
Yeah.
I didn't. I don't drink
Yeah,
anymore.
he didn't
No.
and hasn't.
But it was just nice to voice it, and because normally that's what I would have went back on. But see, I would drink. I wouldn't drink to get drunk to have fun. I would get drunk to pass out. So when I started to deal with my mental health and came out of isolation and started to talk to people and to do things like that, I don't need the alcohol anymore. Once I was able to break through the physical addiction part of it, gone. I've never looked like, I don't want to say I never look back because sometimes I still do. But I don't let me break me anymore, and I don't have to revert to that. Same with pain pills. I don't need them anymore because I was using them to escape and to numb, and so a lot of times when you get help with your mental health, these other bad habits, drinking, whatever it may be, pain pill addiction, some people have porn addiction, sex addiction, whatever it may be. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Just that I think one kind of follows the other, right? When you are making progress and really devoting yourself to bettering your mental health and healing, just in general, healing and growth, the things that you're struggling with that are holding you down, that's just part of it. As you heal and as you grow, they don't have the same grip on you like they did before.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have that control over you, and that's a powerful thing.
Absolutely. That's what freedom feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So honestly, like once I got out of my pain pill addiction, I've never thought about doing that again.
Yeah, I know that one was a whole different beast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was dark place. But yeah, sometimes I still have temptations to drink, but I don't. And I can talk to you about it and move on. But yeah.
And on that note of you talking about it, this one doesn't have to be super long because we kind of already touched it, but how do you communicate differently now? Because you definitely do.
How do I communicate differently?
Yeah.
Give me an example.
So I would just say, like, for example, the one that we just shared, like where you wanted to drink and you talked about it, or when you're struggling with something and you talk about it And I would just say like the underlying difference, I'll just say it, that I've seen
Honesty.
is honesty.
Yeah.
Yep. You're a lot more willing to be forthcoming with what you really feel and what you really think, even if it leads to a difficult conversation, because I also want to say this, difficult conversations can be very productive.
Yeah.
Like hearing or saying, I want to drink, that's a difficult conversation, so productive.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the big thing is when I communicate with people is I can be honest. Before when people would ask me about anything, I would hide my mental health. I would lie about it, downplay it, change the subject. Where now I don't have to.
You're not constantly evading.
No, and I actually, every time I tell you something or tell on the podcast or at a show or wherever we are, and I get to tell somebody the truth, and then I see that you literally see like a flip in them, and all of a sudden they open up and they start telling the truth.
Yes.
And that we put that vulnerability, that's a hard word to say.
Vulnerability.
Yeah,
That's why you brought me on here, so I could say that word for you.
I know. The fact that I do a podcast is the grace of God, because I'm a terrible speaker. I have horrible grammar. I'm a bad speller. So it's through the grace of God that I get in front of a mic and talk, because I'm not a very good speaker. But here we are.
Yeah, and
I'm getting better though. I don't want to say I'm not a very good speaker. I'm a speaker
in progress. Yeah.
So
I'd say you're doing good. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up, but I just want to ask like an ending question, right? What would you say to a first responder who's listening and is struggling right now and still feels that they're very much in that proverbial pit and unhappy with life, struggling, but they hear that you say it can get better? What would you say to them?
Number one, I would say you're not alone. The guilt and shame that's inside your head isn't real.
Yeah.
What your brain's telling you, what the enemies tell you, is a lie. And you don't have to be where you are anymore. And that's why we started this organization, is to help people find a way.
Exactly.
To a new life full of hope and joy. I would tell them, to start reaching out to somebody. And if you don't have anybody to reach out to, go to our website and hit the Get Connected page.
And reach out to us. Absolutely.
We're not professionals. We're not therapists. We're not licensed. We're just peers who have gone through that, and we're willing to talk to you.
Yep. And get you connected to the professionals that you might want to be connected with.
Because that's our goal, is to get you Yeah.
We knew what you were saying there.
Man, let's end this podcast. I can't talk anymore.
Okay.
But yes, reach out and just know that no matter how far down you are, you can get up. And we want to give you a reaching hand to pull you up out of that and show you that there is a life full of hope. And so, never give up. Yeah. And just know you can't do this on your own. I've tried it and it doesn't work. So let's go ahead and end this episode. And
all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I do want to ask that you just engage with us. If you liked listening to this episode, if you just give it a like or comment, and we'll interact with you. We'd love to hear from you and hear what you have to say or what you thought of it. And we'd also ask that you share this episode as well. A lot of times, people that are struggling, you're not going to directly hear that from them. So sometimes it's best to go out on a limb and trust that the people who need to hear this will get a chance to hear it. And so we just thank you for being part of this and being involved with us. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and hearing what we have to say. And we'll catch you in the next episode.